Valeth had lived for 300 years. In that time, she had studied every species that walked among the stars. She had written books about the warrior Kreeth, who stood 12 feet tall and could crush metal with their bare hands. She had spent decades learning about the Asuun, a hive mind of billions that thought as one. She had even met the Void Monarchs, ancient beings so powerful that entire systems bent to their will, but humans confused her. She stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Conclave Station, watching the newest species to earn a seat at the table. They had arrived just 40 years ago. These strange creatures from a small blue world. They were soft. They were short-lived. Most of them died before reaching 100 years. Their bodies broke easily. They needed to breathe, to eat, to sleep. By every measure she knew, they should have died long ago on their dangerous homeworld. Yet here they were. The chamber was full today. Representatives from 100 species filled the curved rows of seats. The air smelled of fear. Valeth could taste it on her tongue. Sharp and sour. Even the Kreeth warriors looked nervous, their massive hands gripping the armrests of their chairs. The reason for this fear floated on the holographic display in the center of the room. The devouring swarm. Valeth had read about them, of course. Everyone had. They were a living nightmare that moved through space like a plague. Billions of creatures. Each one grown from the bodies of those they had eaten. They did not negotiate. They did not stop. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on. 17 civilizations had fallen to them. 17 species, wiped from existence. Their bones now formed the shells of swarm ships. Their flesh had become fuel for the endless hunger. And now the swarm had reached the outer rim. The speaker, a tall being made of living crystal, raised its arms for silence. Its voice rang through the chamber like a bell. The swarm has entered the Valar system. They will reach the inhabited worlds within 30 cycles. We must decide our response. The debate that followed made Valeth feel sick. The Kreeth wanted to pull back their fleets and defend their own borders. Let the frontier worlds fall, they said. Buy time to prepare. The Asuun agreed, their representatives speaking with the voice of billions. The math was simple. The Valar could not be saved. Better to sacrifice them than lose more trying. One by one, the great powers of the galaxy spoke. And one by one, they chose to abandon 17 billion people to be eaten alive. Valeth watched the human delegation through all of this. There were only 5 of them, sitting in the back rows where new species were placed. Their leader was a woman with gray hair and lines on her face. Commander Ilara Chen, the files said. A military officer who had fought in 3 of humanity's wars. She sat very still while the others talked. Her face showed nothing, but her eyes moved constantly, watching everything. When the crystal speaker asked if any others wished to speak, Commander Chen stood up. The chamber fell quiet. Some of the delegates looked annoyed. What could these newcomers possibly add? They had no great fleets, no ancient weapons. They had been flying among the stars for less than 2 centuries. Commander Chen walked to the center of the chamber. She was short compared to most species here. The Kreeth could have crushed her with one hand. But something about the way she moved made Valeth pay attention. I have listened to all of you, Chen said. Her voice was calm and clear. I have heard your reasons, your calculations, your strategies. Well, she paused and looked around the room. 17 billion people are about to die. Families, children, entire generations wiped out. And you sit here talking about acceptable losses. A Kreeth commander stood up, anger in his voice. What would you have us do, human? Throw away our ships in a battle we cannot win? The swarm has never been defeated. Never. What can your tiny fleet do against them? Commander Chen smiled. It was not a happy smile. We will hold the line. Silence filled the chamber. Valeth felt her heart skip. She must have heard wrong. The humans could not be serious. Their entire fleet was maybe 400 ships. The swarm numbered in the tens of thousands. This was not courage. This was suicide. The Kreeth commander laughed, a harsh barking sound. You will die, probably, Chen agreed. But we will die fighting. And while we fight, you will have time. Time to evacuate civilians. Time to bring your fleets together. Time to prepare. Why? The question came from the Asuun representative. Why would you sacrifice yourselves for species that are not your own? There is no logic in this. Commander Chen turned to face the hive mind's avatar. Because someone has to. Because when we look at those 17 billion people, we see our own families, our own children. We see people who need help. She shook her head. We will not stand by and watch them die. The chamber erupted into noise. Arguments. Questions. Demands. But the human delegation was already leaving. Their decision made. Valeth found herself on her feet before she knew what she was doing. She pushed through the crowd and caught up with the humans in the corridor outside. Commander Chen, the gray-haired woman, stopped and turned. Up close, Valeth could see the lines around her eyes, the weariness in her face. This was someone who had seen too much death already. Ambassador Valeth, Chen said, the Selvari representative. I've read your work on comparative xenopsychology. It's impressive. I want to come with you. The words surprised Valeth almost as much as they surprised Chen. But once they were out, she knew they were right. She had spent her whole life studying species from a distance, writing about courage she had never witnessed. Now, at the end of everything, she wanted to see it for herself. Chen studied her for a long moment. You understand what you're asking. We're not coming back from this. I understand. Then welcome aboard the indomitable Ambassador. Chen offered her hand in the human gesture of greeting. I hope you find what you're looking for. Valeth took her hand. The human's grip was warm and strong. As she followed the delegation toward their shuttle, Valeth told herself she was simply doing her job, observing, recording, documenting the final days of a young species too brave for its own good. She did not yet understand that she was about to witness something that would change her forever. None of them did. The UNSC Indomitable was not what Valeth expected. She had seen the elegant ships of the Selvari, built like works of art with flowing lines and perfect curves. She had walked the massive Kreth warships, designed to inspire fear with their size alone. Even the Asuun vessels had a strange beauty, grown from living material that pulsed with the heartbeat of the hive. The human ship was ugly. It was a block of gray metal, covered in armor plates and weapons. Every surface was functional. Every corner had a purpose. There were no decorations. No beauty. The Indomitable looked like it had been built by people who expected to be hurt. As Valeth walked through the corridors, she realized that was exactly the point. We call it the brick, said the young officer escorting her. A pilot named Marcus Torres. He had dark skin and a quick smile that seemed strange on someone heading toward death. Not pretty, but she can take a beating. Why build ships this way? Valeth asked. Other species focus on speed, on avoiding damage entirely. Marcus laughed. Because we know we're going to get hit. We always get hit. So we build things that can survive it. He patted the metal wall with clear affection. She'll keep fighting until there's nothing left to fight with. This philosophy confused Valeth. Every other species she knew tried to avoid damage at all costs. Retreat was wisdom. Survival was the goal. But humans seemed to expect pain as part of any battle. Over the next several days, as the fleet traveled toward the Velar system, Valeth tried to understand these strange creatures. She spent time in the mess hall, watching humans eat together. They laughed. They told stories. They played games with small pieces of paper and dice. Someone had brought a guitar, and in the evenings, they would sing songs together. Old songs, Marcus told her. Songs from wars fought long ago on their homeworld. These people knew they were going to die. The numbers were clear. 400 ships against tens of thousands of swarm organisms. There would be no victory here. Only sacrifice. And yet they smiled. I do not understand. Valeth told Marcus one evening. You are sailing toward death. All of you know this. Why are you not afraid? Valeth Tordi provided. With the greeted one. I do not understand. Why are you not afraid? Marcus thought about the question for a long moment. They were sitting in an observation room, watching the stars streak past as the ship traveled through faster-than-light space. We are afraid, he said finally. Every single one of us. But fear doesn't change anything, does it? The Valar still need help. Running away won't make us less scared. It will just make us cowards. He smiled, but this time, it was sad. We've always been the underdog, Ambassador. Our whole history is full of times we should have lost, should have given up, should have died, but we never learned how to quit. Valeth asked Commander Chen for access to humanity's historical archives. What she found there kept her awake for 2 nights. Humans had not built their civilization in peace. They had built it through war, plague, and disaster. They had fought each other for thousands of years. Millions had died in conflicts over land, resources, beliefs. They had created weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They had come within days of using them. They had faced plagues that killed half their population. Ice ages, floods, famines. Every few generations, something tried to wipe them out, and every single time, they survived. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were the smartest, but because they refused to stop fighting. The archives showed her something else too. Humans did not fight like other species. When they were losing, they did not retreat. They pushed forward. They threw more soldiers into battles that were already lost. They called this reinforcing failure, and they spoke of it with pride. There was a word they used again and again: sacrifice. Valeth looked up the definition. It meant giving up something precious for the sake of others. Humans honored this above all other virtues. Their greatest heroes were not those who won the most battles, but those who died to save others. This made no sense to her. The Selvari valued survival above all. Living to fight another day was the highest wisdom. But humans seemed to believe that some things were worth more than life itself. On the 4th day, the fleet received new information. The swarm had accelerated. They would reach the populated worlds of Valar sooner than expected. 17 billion people lived there. There was not enough time to evacuate them all. Every strategic model said the same thing. The math was clear. The humans should change course, abandon the Valar, save their ships for battles they could actually win. Commander Chen called a meeting of all ship captains. Valeth watched from the back of the room. You have all seen the updated projections, Chen said. Her voice was calm, as if she were discussing the weather. The swarm will arrive before full evacuation is possible. If we engage them as planned, we will be outnumbered 30-1. She paused and looked at the faces of her officers. Some were young, barely adults by human standards. Others were old veterans with scars and gray hair. All of them watched her with the same expression: trust. Command has given us permission to withdraw, Chen continued. No one would blame us. The numbers don't work. Victory is impossible, a young captain in the front row spoke up. With respect, Commander, no one here signed up for possible. We signed up for necessary. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Chen smiled. It transformed her tired face into something almost beautiful. Then we go to flank speed. All ships. We reach Valar before the swarm does, and we make them pay for every inch of space they take. The meeting ended. Officers rushed to their posts. The fleet surged forward, pushing their engines to the limit. Valeth found herself standing beside Commander Chen as the room emptied. May I ask you something? Chen nodded. Why are you doing this? The Valar are not your people. You barely know them. Your species has only been in this galaxy for 40 years. Why would you die for strangers? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Because they asked for help. That's enough. But the cost is our lives, Chen agreed. But the price of doing nothing is our souls. If we fly away and let 17 billion people die, what are we? What do we become? She shook her head. There are some things worse than death, Ambassador. Living as a coward is one of them. Valeth had no response to this. She watched Commander Chen walk away, heading toward the bridge to prepare for the battle ahead. In 300 years of studying species across the galaxy, Valeth had never met anyone like these humans. They were not the strongest, or the oldest, or the wisest. They were fragile creatures from a dangerous world, living short lives in a cold universe. But they had something she had never seen before. Something she did not yet have a name for. She would learn its name soon enough. Everyone would. The devouring swarm was worse than the records described. Valeth stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the enemy appear on their sensors. Her hearts were pounding so hard she could feel them in her throat. She had seen images of the swarm. She had read the reports from fallen civilizations, but nothing had prepared her for this. They looked like a living wave. Billions of creatures, each one the size of a small ship, moving together in perfect hunger. Their bodies were grown from the dead. Valeth could see pieces of ships from 17 different civilizations built into their forms. Bones and metal, flesh and machinery, all twisted together into something that should not exist. The main display showed the numbers. Over 12,000 swarm organisms. The human fleet had 340 ships. Contact in 15 minutes, a sensor officer reported. His voice was steady, but Valeth could see his hands shaking. Commander Chen stood at the center of the bridge, watching the approaching nightmare with cold eyes. Around her, the crew worked at their stations. No one ran. No one screamed. They had known this was coming. All ships, form up, Chen said, into the fleet communication channel. Standard battle formation. Stay tight. Watch each other's backs. Valeth watched the human fleet move. They were coming together, forming a dense wall of ships instead of spreading out. This was wrong. Every tactical manual she had ever read said to spread your forces, give the enemy multiple targets. Bunching up just made you easier to kill. Why are they doing this? She asked a nearby officer. The young man looked at her with something like pity. So, we can cover each other. If a ship goes down, the one next to it can finish its fight. We don't leave anyone alone. Before Valeth could respond, the swarm began to move. They came like a flood. Thousands of creatures rushing toward the human fleet. Their bodies opened to reveal mouths full of teeth and weapons grown from stolen technology. They screamed as they came, a sound that traveled through space on every frequency, a howl of endless hunger that had echoed through the galaxy for 1,000,000 years. The human fleet answered with their own sound. It started low, a drumbeat that pounded through the communication channels. Then came music, harsh and loud, full of rage and defiance, and then voices, hundreds of ships, thousands of humans, all of them screaming back at the void. Valeth had never heard anything like it. Every other species she knew fought in silence, or with cold tactical commands, but the humans were singing war songs, shouting insults at an enemy that had destroyed civilizations, laughing in the face of certain death. The swarm hesitated. Valeth saw it clearly on the sensors. For one brief moment, the wave of creatures slowed. They had never experienced this before. Every other species had run or surrendered, or died quietly. No one had ever screamed back. Then the battle began. The human ships did not wait to be attacked. They surged forward, directly into the heart of the swarm. Weapons fired in all directions. The darkness of space lit up with explosions and energy beams and missiles. Valeth watched in horror as a human destroyer was torn apart by 3 swarm creatures. But instead of trying to escape, the dying ship turned its remaining weapons on its attackers and fired until there was nothing left. Another ship dove in to finish what its sister had started. The Avalon is down, someone reported. Cairo is taking heavy damage. Seattle and Mumbai are moving to support. Tell them to hold the line, Chen ordered. Her voice was calm, but her hands were gripped tight on the railing. No retreat, not 1 inch. A swarm creature broke through the formation and headed straight for the Indomitable. It was massive, a twisted thing of metal and flesh, with a mouth that could swallow their entire ship. Valeth felt true terror for the first time in centuries. Ramming speed, Chen said quietly. The Indomitable surged forward. Valeth grabbed a console to keep from falling as the ship accelerated toward the monster. At the last moment, every forward weapon fired at once. The creature exploded against their armored prow, its remains scraping along the hull with a sound like screaming. Damage report. Forward armor at 60%. Weapons still online. We're still in the fight, Commander. Chen smiled. Good. Find me another target. The battle raged for hours. Valeth lost track of individual ships. The display was a chaos of movement and death. Human vessels died, but they died fighting. Some overloaded their engines and flew directly into enemy formations, taking dozens of swarm creatures with them. Others formed walls to protect damaged allies, absorbing hits meant for ships that could no longer defend themselves. She saw a pilot named Torres on the tactical display. His fighter wing was trapped, surrounded by swarm creatures. Instead of trying to escape, they flew in a tight circle, protecting a damaged transport ship behind them. One by one, the fighters went down, but the transport survived. Torres is hit, someone said. He's lost his wing. Valeth watched the small dot that was Marcus's fighter spin out of control. For a moment, she thought he would crash. Instead, the damaged ship steadied itself and turned toward the nearest swarm creature. For the transport. Marcus's voice came through the communication channel, laughing even now. Someone tell my mom I said hi. His fighter hit the swarm creature, and both disappeared in fire. The transport escaped. By the third hour, the human fleet had lost over 100 ships. The space around them was filled with wreckage, both human and swarm, but they had not retreated. They had not broken, and something impossible was happening. The swarm was pulling back, not retreating. The swarm never retreated. But they were regrouping, keeping their distance, almost as if they were confused. In a million years of consuming civilizations, they had never encountered anything like this. Species fled, species surrendered, species died quietly. Species did not charge into the teeth of death singing war songs. They're scared, Valeth whispered. She could not believe what she was seeing. The swarm is scared. Commander Chen heard her. The old woman's face was gray with exhaustion, but her eyes burned with something fierce. Not scared enough, Chen said. Not yet, but they will be. The first engagement was over. The human fleet had lost nearly 40% of its ships. The survivors were damaged, low on ammunition, running on determination alone, but they had done something no one had ever done before. They had made the swarm hesitate. They had made the endless hunger stop and think. Behind them, on Velar Prime, evacuations had begun. Every hour the humans bought meant more lives saved. Millions of civilians were fleeing to safety while these strange, short-lived creatures held the line. Valeth looked at her hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, she realized. From something else. Something she had never felt before. She thought about Marcus Torres, laughing as he died to save strangers. She thought about the ships that had thrown themselves into the enemy to protect their brothers and sisters. She thought about Commander Chen, standing calm at the center of chaos, refusing to break. For 300 years, Valeth had studied species. She had catalogued their strengths and weaknesses. She had never found one that impressed her. Until now. The humans were not the strongest. They were not the oldest. They were not the wisest. But they were something else. Something she was only beginning to understand. And for the first time in her long life, she was proud to stand among them. The next 72 hours taught Valeth what humans truly were. She had thought she understood them after watching the first battle. She had been wrong. That was just the beginning. The swarm came again on the second day. And the third. And the fourth. Wave after wave. Trying to break through to the populated worlds beyond. The human fleet stood in their way, bleeding and burning but refusing to move. Ships that should have been abandoned kept fighting. Valeth watched crews seal broken sections with whatever they could find, sometimes with their own bodies. Engineers welded guns back together while the ship shook from enemy fire. When ammunition ran out, they loaded cargo containers into launch tubes and fired them at the enemy. One destroyer, the Beijing, lost all its weapons in the second wave. Instead of retreating, the captain positioned his ship as a shield for 3 damaged cruisers. The Beijing took 17 direct hits before finally breaking apart. The cruisers survived. Valeth went down to Velar Prime with a group of human marines. She had to see this for herself. The ground battle was worse than the space combat. The swarm had sent smaller creatures to the surface, trying to stop the evacuation. They poured out of organic drop pods, thousands of hungry mouths looking for flesh. The humans met them with fire and steel. Valeth followed a medical unit through the burning streets of the capital city. The sounds were terrible. Screaming. Explosions. The wet tearing noise of swarm creatures feeding. Smoke filled the air so thick she could barely see. A medic named Yuki Tanaka led the unit. She was small, even by human standards, with gentle hands that moved quickly over wounded soldiers and civilians alike. Valeth watched her pull a Velar child from under a collapsed building, checking for injuries even as swarm creatures advanced toward their position. "We have to move," a soldier shouted. "They're coming." "Not without the civilians," Yuki replied. Her voice was calm, focused. She had a wound on her stomach that was bleeding through her uniform, but she ignored it. "Help me carry them." They loaded wounded Velar onto stretchers and began moving toward the evacuation point. The swarm followed, getting closer with every moment. Yuki stayed at the back, treating the wounded while walking, refusing to leave anyone behind. A swarm creature broke through the line. It lunged at a group of Velar children. Mouth opening wide, Yuki stepped in front of them. She fired her small sidearm directly into the creature's mouth. It screamed and staggered. She fired again and again until the weapon clicked empty. The creature fell, but its claws had caught her side. Blood poured from the wound. Valeth could see that it was fatal. The medic was dying on her feet. "Yuki," a soldier said, reaching for her. "Let us carry you." "No time." Yuki picked up a rifle from a fallen Marine. "Get them to the ships. All of them. I'll hold here. Everyone. All cases. May be our Yuki Argan. I'll hold here. You can't. That's an order." She smiled. And despite everything, it was a peaceful smile. "Tell my family I did good. Okay? Tell them I helped." Valeth watched the small woman turn to face the advancing swarm. She was one person with one rifle against hundreds of creatures. But she stood tall, planting herself between the monsters and the fleeing civilians. The last thing Valeth saw before the smoke covered everything was Yuki firing into the horde, laughing and crying at the same time, buying seconds for children she would never know to reach safety. They found her body later. She had moved 30 meters forward from where she had made her stand. 30 meters of dead swarm creatures behind her. She had not retreated. She had attacked. The rifle was empty. There was a knife in her hand. She was still smiling. Back in orbit, the situation was becoming desperate. The human fleet had lost 60% of its ships. The Conclave reinforcements were still 2 days away. The evacuation was not complete. Commander Chen broadcast to all remaining vessels. Her voice was tired but unbroken. "I'm not going to lie to you. We're out of miracles. Our ships are falling apart. We've lost friends and family. The swarm keeps coming." She paused. "There are 12 million civilians still on the planet. The last evacuation transports need 4 more hours." Valeth heard the weight of those words. 4 hours might as well have been 4 years against the swarm. "I'm not asking you to live," Chen continued. "I'm asking you to hold. 4 hours, that's all. 4 hours and 12 million people go home to their families." The communication channel was silent for a long moment. Then a voice came through. The captain of a heavily damaged cruiser. "Indomitable. This is the resilience. We're with you. Time damned binda. On great say damned binda." Another voice. "Tokyo, standing by. Nairobi ready. Mumbai holding." One by one, every surviving ship responded. 137 vessels, most of them barely able to fly. All of them choosing to stay. Chen closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were clear. All ships, form up. Let's give them something to remember. The final 4 hours were the longest of Valeth's life. The swarm threw everything at them. Creatures that hadn't been seen in centuries. Massive organisms designed specifically to break enemy fleets. The human ships met each wave and broke against them like water against rocks. The Resilience went down, defending a cargo ship full of refugees. Tokyo was torn apart but kept firing until its reactor went critical. Mumbai rammed a swarm carrier 3 times its size, destroying both. On the Indomitable, systems failed one by one. Power fluctuated. Weapons overheated. The hull groaned under constant attack. But Chen never left the bridge. And her crew never stopped fighting. Valeth found herself helping. Loading weapons. Treating wounded. Doing whatever needed to be done. She was not human. But in that moment, she felt like she was part of something larger than herself. 3 hours. 2 hours. 1 hour. Last transport is away, the communication officer reported, her voice cracked with emotion. They made it. They're all safe. A ragged cheer went through the bridge. Some crew members were crying. Others laughed with exhaustion and relief. 12 million lives. Saved because these strange creatures refused to run. Commander, the sensor officer said. His voice was quiet. The swarm is regrouping. Major formation heading our way. Chen nodded. She looked at the tactical display. 37 human ships remained. Less than 100 against thousands. Engines are down, engineering reported. We're dead in the water. Weapons. 2 forward batteries still firing. Everything else is gone. Valeth watched Chen absorb this information. The battle was over. They had achieved their mission. The civilians were safe. Now there was nothing left but the dying. Open a channel, Chen said. All frequencies. I want the swarm to hear this. The communication officer obeyed. Chen straightened her uniform and lifted her chin. When she spoke, her voice carried across space to every ship, every creature, every corner of the battlefield. This is Commander Alara Chen, of the UNSC Indomitable. We came here to save lives. We have done this. Our mission is complete. She paused. But we are not done. Every one of my people stands ready to fight until our last breath. You will not forget us. You will not forget what happened here. When you think of humanity, you will remember this day. You will remember that we did not run. She smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Come and get us, you hungry bastards. We'll be waiting. The bridge crew stood at their stations, weapons ready, facing the approaching darkness. Valeth stood with them. She was not afraid anymore. If she was going to die, she could not imagine better company. The swarm came, and the humans held. Valeth woke up 3 days later in a conclave medical station. She remembered fragments. The swarm closing in. Explosions rocking the Indomitable. Commander Chen ordering the last escape pods launched. Strong hands pushing her inside. The sound of weapons still firing as the pod flew away. She had not wanted to leave. For the first time in her long life, she had wanted to stay and fight. But the humans had made the choice for her. A Selvari nurse told her what happened. The conclave reinforcements arrived just as the human fleet made its last stand. Thousands of ships from a dozen species. More firepower than had been gathered in centuries. They expected to find nothing but wreckage. Instead, they found the swarm in retreat. The endless hunger, the million-year terror of the galaxy, was running away. 37 human ships had held against thousands. They had not won in any traditional sense. Most of them were destroyed. But they had done something unprecedented. They had made the swarm afraid. For the first time in its existence, the swarm had encountered something it could not consume. Not because the humans were too strong, but because they would not stop fighting. No matter what the swarm did, these strange creatures kept coming. Dying ships became weapons. Wounded soldiers became walls. Every human bought time with their life, and the swarm could not understand why. The reinforcements found the Indomitable drifting among thousands of dead swarm creatures. The ship was dark and silent, its hull torn open in a dozen places. But on the bridge, still at her station, they found Commander Chen. She was alive, barely. Her body was broken in ways that should have been fatal. But she was breathing. And in her hand, she still held the communicator she had used to broadcast defiance to the very end. When they pulled her from the wreckage, she opened her eyes and asked a single question. Did they make it? The civilians? They told her yes. 12 million people were safe. Her fleet had held the line long enough. She smiled and closed her eyes. She lived. So did 43 other humans, pulled from escape pods and wreckage scattered across the system. Out of 30,000 who had come to fight, fewer than 50 survived. They had saved 17 billion lives. 6 months later, Valeth stood before the Galactic Conclave. The Great Chamber was full. Every species with a seat had sent representatives. The Kreeth warriors sat in respectful silence. The Osuan listened through 100 bodies. Even the Void Monarchs had sent observers. They were here to receive her report. The official record of humanity's sacrifice. Valeth had spent months preparing. She had documents, data, analysis, everything organized perfectly. But when she stood at the center of the chamber, she could not read from her papers. The words felt empty. They could not capture what she had witnessed, so she spoke from her hearts. I went to the Valar system, expecting to document the death of a young species, she began. Humans are fragile, short-lived. They have no great weapons, no ancient technology, no natural advantages. By every measure, they should have lost. She paused, remembering Marcus Torres laughing in his final moments. Yuki Tanaka, standing against a horde with nothing but a rifle. Commander Chen's voice cutting through chaos like a blade. I was wrong about them. We were all wrong about them. She walked slowly across the floor, looking at the faces watching her. The swarm has existed for 1,000,000 years. It has destroyed 17 civilizations. Species that were older than humanity. Species that were stronger. Species that had every advantage. She shook her head, and in 4 days, a few hundred human ships did what none of them could do. They made the swarm retreat. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. She raised her hand for silence. I asked them why. Why would they die for strangers? Why fight when there was no hope of victory? What could possibly be worth such sacrifice? She thought of Chen's words on the Indomitable. They told me that some things are worth more than survival. They told me that when people cry for help, someone has to answer. They told me they would rather die standing than live on their knees. Her voice grew stronger. Humans do not fight because they believe they will win. They fight because the alternative is unacceptable. They would burn themselves to ash to light the way for others. And they will do this. Again and again. Without hesitation. Without counting the cost. She stopped at the center of the chamber and looked up at the gathered representatives of 100 worlds. This is why the stars tremble, she said. Not because humanity is the strongest. Not because they are the oldest or the wisest. The stars tremble because when darkness comes, humans do not run. They light themselves on fire and charge into the night. And they keep charging until the darkness itself learns to fear the light. The chamber was silent. Valeth could feel the weight of her words settling on the assembly. I watched them die for people they had never met. I watched them laugh in the face of annihilation. I watched them hold when any sane species would have fled. She paused, and I understood, finally, why they are different. Humanity does not hope to survive. Humanity chooses to matter. She bowed her head. That is my report. Make of it what you will. 3 weeks later, Valeth traveled to Earth. The humans had built a memorial for those who fell at Valar. It stood on a hill overlooking one of their oceans. A simple wall of stone carved with 30,000 names. People came from all over the planet to leave flowers and candles and tokens of remembrance. Valeth found Commander Chen there, sitting in a chair that moved on wheels because her legs no longer worked. The old woman looked out at the ocean, her face peaceful despite everything she had lost. Ambassador. Chen smiled when she saw her. I hoped you would come. I hoped you would come. I had to. Valeth sat beside her. I never thanked you. For saving my life. Chen waved her hand dismissively. You were one of us by then. We don't leave our people behind. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun paint the water gold and red. Do you regret it? Valeth finally asked. The cost was so high. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. I think about them every day. Every single person who didn't come home. But, regret? She shook her head. No. We did what we had to do. We saved people who needed saving. That's all that matters. A small figure approached them. A human child. No more than 6 or 7 years old. With curly hair and bright eyes. In her hands, she carried a candle. Excuse me, the child said. Are you the lady from the news? The one who was at the battle? Valeth nodded. The girl held out the candle. Would you like to light one? For the heroes? Valeth took the candle. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it. The girl pulled out a small lighter and touched it to the wick. A tiny flame came to life. Together, they walked to the memorial wall. Valeth placed her candle among thousands of others, small lights flickering in the gathering darkness. She read some of the names on the wall. Marcus Torres, Yuki Tanaka, captains and crew members, and soldiers and medics. 30,000 lives given freely so that others might live. The child took her hand. It was warm and small and full of life. Thank you for being their friend, the girl said solemnly. My daddy says friends are the most important thing in the whole universe. Valeth looked down at this tiny creature. This representative of a species that had changed everything she thought she knew. Humans were fragile and short-lived and impossibly brave. They burned bright and fast and left the galaxy forever changed. Your father is wise, she said. The sun set behind them. The candles glowed in the darkness, thousands of small flames keeping watch over the fallen. Above them, the stars were coming out. The same stars that had witnessed humanity's sacrifice. The same stars that would remember this day for as long as light traveled through the void. The stars, Valeth thought, should tremble. But not from fear, from hope, because now they knew that somewhere in the darkness, there was a species that would never stop fighting for the light. A species that would burn itself to ash rather than let the night win. Humanity had shown the galaxy what courage truly meant, and nothing would ever be the same.